Stop by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is Mike. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing well, thank you for asking.
Good, glad to hear it. And Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to be here, excited to do the show today. And
Awesome.
Mike, what are we doing today?
Well, Justin, I'm glad you asked because, as always, we like to start off every episode talking about what is on our minds, which is usually the media we've been watching or reading since the last episode. Then, for our feature review, we will be reviewing Velvet Buzzsaw, which will contain a spoiler-free section before moving right into spoilers.
And don't forget, each month we review a film from the Criterion Collection, which is voted on by the listeners. So go check out our latest episode on Mulholland Drive, and look for our next episode, which is going to be on Princess Bride.
It was the winner.
It won the poll, yeah. Much to my chagrin, I really wanted In the Mood for Love, but then I get to watch Princess Bride, so it's not that bad.
Yeah, obviously we were going with a romance theme, if that wasn't obvious from the other titles. The other option was Punch Drunk Love, which did not win either.
Yeah. It's okay. We'll all enjoy the Princess Bride.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in like many a year, so
Yeah.
I'm due anyway.
I'll tell you what, next month we'll do films that have love in the title, and you can just pick those two
I
again.
can just
and hope
stick
they
it right
win.
back in there.
We're going to pick this one until you guys pick In the Mood for Love.
Yeah, until the audience agrees with us.
Yeah.
So if you want to vote in our polls or send us any questions about the films we're watching that we can answer on the show, you can send those to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinecast. You can also email us directly at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. Although I wouldn't recommend voting in the poll there. That would be kind of weird and hard for us to calculate.
Yeah, so please don't.
Just questions only at the email. And then, of course, go to iTunes, give us a 5-star review, subscribe to the show, or subscribe on whatever place you listen to podcasts on.
All right, guys, are we ready to go ahead and move into what has been on our minds?
Absolutely.
Always.
Oh, man.
Youth on the march!
All right, Justin.
Hi.
Hey, man, how's it going?
Still good. Still
Good.
great.
Good. What's on your mind? If you don't mind me asking.
I don't mind telling
This
you
seems
what's
like
on
the
my
place to do
mind.
that.
It is. So this week, what is on my mind is Singin' in the Rain, the delightful musical movie, which I assume we've all seen, right?
Yeah, of course.
I have not seen it.
What?
Yeah, this is a
Wow.
tough
Oh,
one
no.
for me. This is the list of shame here.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's actually that's surprising to me.
It is surprising.
Yeah, it's surprising to me too.
Have you seen any of those like old Hollywood style musicals like that?
I have, yeah. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any, but I have seen, I have seen a bunch of them. Singing in the Mountains with what is
Is that a real movie?
The Sound of Music?
The Sound of Music? Yes, AKA also known as Singing in the Mountains.
I think that's your new shame.
It did start
No.
as a sequel to Singin' in the Rain,
Yes.
but they changed the
They
name
got
to
tired
Sound
of
of Music.
singing in the rain, and they're going to go
they're
somewhere where
singing in the
it
mountains.
rains less.
Germany, apparently.
Goodness. Well,
Yeah, how
So,
embarrassing.
for anybody who hasn't seen Singin' in the Rain, and this very, very much includes you, Chris, you should watch it because it's great. It's
Yeah, I
so
agree.
delightful. It's one of the best musicals ever made, in my opinion. It's one of like probably in my top 5 films of all time. I think it's just wonderful and enjoyable. I did want to say that like the reason that I watched it is because I'm going to be guesting on the Cinemus podcast next week, and we're going to be talking about Singin' in the Rain and The Artist. So I watched one
nice.
half of those movies so far with Singin' in the Rain.
Nice.
Yeah, I think when The Artist was making its rounds in theaters, I think that was probably the last time I watched Singing in the Rain.
Oh, really?
Sometime
been a
around there,
minute.
yeah. Yeah, because I remember after seeing The Artist thinking of Singing in the Rain. There's no way you can watch
course.
The Artist and not think the entire time of Singing in the Rain if you've seen Singing in the Rain.
Right.
But I agree with you. This movie is wonderful. Of like all the old school like Hollywood musicals, this is my favorite one for sure. I like some other ones. I like some Fred Astaire movies. I liked Bandwagon.
Yeah.
But I think Singing in the Rain, I think, takes the cake hands down as far as like my favorite musical.
Yeah. And I think what really works about it for people like us is that it's very heavily set in the movies, right? And the movie world in Hollywood. And it's a bit meta at times. Not overly meta like a lot of today's movies are, but just a little bit, like the right amount to be just fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, the cast is so charming and so talented. Gene Kelly is amazing. Debbie Reynolds is amazing. Who's that third guy? I forget.
Donald O'Connor.
Donald O'Connor. Thank you.
Yeah. He's like one of the best parts of the movie. Like, to me, he almost steals the show from Gene Kelly.
I still, constantly have Good Morning stuck in my head.
Yeah. Just about every morning I think about that song.
Yeah. Yeah, there's really no way. And like I always, my favorite line is like, "It's great to stay up late."
Yeah.
It's just so silly and fun.
Anyways, I don't want to talk about it too much. I just also wanted to like plug Cinemus podcast a little bit, which is a good podcast, and just announce I'll be guesting on it next week. So look out for that episode as well. They do a pretty rad show. They watch like the 1001 movies before you must see before you die book. They watch through that, like 2 movies an episode, and then they decide, as the name Cinema suggests, whether they are Cinemust or Cinebust. And they kind of decide whether or not they're like worthy of being a movie everyone should see.
Yeah, enjoy that podcast for sure.
Yeah, Cinemusts is great.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's it for me. I don't really have a lot to say about it other than just like, damn it, if you haven't seen it, like Chris, you should go see it.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast probably have not seen it. It's a very old movie, and everyone's probably heard of it and knows the iconic scenes and everything. But yeah, see it. It's so enjoyable. It's not the slightest bit like boring. Like a lot of people have like a hesitancy towards like older movies. Probably not many people who listen to this show. But if you are listening and you're not into like old school Hollywood musicals and you think you're not into them, try Singing in the Rain.
Yeah.
It's very
it's the
accessible.
one to start with, and it's the one that turned me onto him because I didn't think I was interested in him, over a decade ago when I was getting into films, and came across Singing in the Rain. I was like, yeah, I guess I'll watch it. Fine. I hear it's good, and it just blew me away. Just how much I loved it, and I watched it once in a cinema history class. I don't know if you remember this, Mike, but we had a guy in there who was talking to us on like the day we were getting ready to watch Singing in the Rain, and we were talking about, you and I were saying, it's one of the best musicals ever made. And he was like, oh, no, I think like one of the best musicals ever made is Moulin Rouge. And the newest version with Ewan McGregor. And we were both kind of like, well, let's hold that opinion and see what you think after Singing in the Rain. And I'm pretty sure afterwards he was like, okay, you guys are right. That's pretty great.
Yeah.
So
I vaguely remember that. I would have forgotten had you not brought it up, but yeah, I remember Moulin Rouge. It's weird to compare them, I guess, but different kinds of musicals, but hands down Singing in the Rain for me.
For sure. But yeah, so that's it. I'll leave Singing in the Rain there. So, Chris, what is on your mind?
So these last 2 weeks, I've been jealously watching Matt Neglia at Next Best Picture on Twitter. He's been covering Sundance, and I've been wishing I was there this whole time.
Yeah, me too.
If you haven't followed him, you should really go give him a follow. He's did really great coverage over Sundance, and he does great coverage over the Oscars.
And he runs the Next Best Picture Show podcast. So his Twitter handle, his Twitter handle is at Next Best Picture.
Yeah, so I really kind of wanted to talk about some of the films that stood out, that won the Sundance Awards, and because I really think that these are movies that we don't know that much about right now, but we are going to be watching this year, or if not the near future. So I wanted to kind of go over the winners. I'm going to read those real quick for you guys. And this is just the U.S. Dramatic Competition winners. But what we have is, for the Grand Jury Prize, is Clemency. The Audience Award was Brittany Runs a Marathon. Directing, Joe Talbot won for The Last Black Man in San Francisco. The Waldo Salt Screenwriting Award was to Pippa Bianco for Cher. The Special Jury Award for Vision and Craft was Alma Harrell for Honey Boy. Special Jury Award for Creative Collaboration was The Last Black Man in San Francisco. And the last one is Special Jury Award for Breakthrough Performance. It was Rian Barreto for Cher as well, which are all kind of movies that I'm interested in now. Some other ones that I really felt were interesting was Apollo 11, especially after we watched First Man, but it's a documentary, like 18,000 hours of NASA footage that they took and made into a documentary about the moon landing, and that is really fascinating to me, and I really can't wait to watch that. The other one that there's two more that I'm interested in. Brittany Runs a Marathon has gotten really good reviews, and I think it got picked up. I'm not sure by who. I think it was Amazon. But
yeah, Amazon Studios.
Yeah. So that one's a cool one that I'm interested in seeing. It's just about a lady that decides to run a marathon in one block at a time.
Yeah.
So
I'm really interested in that one too, and it's got the girl who's in Workaholics, who's their coworker in it, Jillian Bell. Who I think she's pretty funny in this show.
Yeah, and, blonde, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this one seems really great. It seems kind of obviously an older woman, but it seems kind of in that like 8th grade, pretty funny kind of dramedy that will be kind of crowd pleasing, I guess. Like you know what I mean? Just like an enjoyable movie.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one that I was kind of interested in is an Australian zombie movie called Little Monsters, starring Lupita Nyong'o. And yeah, it looks like a fun movie. Cool. I read an article where they had to there's a bunch of kids in this movie, but it's a zombie film, so they had to kind of manipulate it so that the kids didn't see these gross, disgusting things that's in the movie, so they didn't scar the kids for life. So I felt like that was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm interested by that one. I've only seen like an image from it, but it looks pretty entertaining. I don't know. Or
should be interesting.
Scary? I guess it's kind of a horror comedy, but
yeah. It's one to keep on your radar for sure, I think.
Yeah, I think the last time I was not excited about a zombie horror comedy was like Zombieland, and I was real wrong about that one because that movie's good and funny. So I'm going to choose to be excited about this one.
Are you choosing to be excited for Zombieland 2 that was announced like last week? Or the poster for it came out last week?
Not as much, but that's more because it's a sequel, not because it's Zombieland specifically.
But you love Rush Hour 2.
That was different, though. That was before I got tired of sequels. It was when I was fresh.
That's when sequels were a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
Versus an inevitable shrug.
Disappointment, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so other things that I've seen that I'm excited about, Shia LaBeouf had a movie there.
Oh, yeah.
A debut called, I think, Honey Boy.
Yeah, that's the Honey Boy one, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a bit like his autobiographical about like a child star and his relationship with his father or something. But I hear that's very good from what I've heard.
Plays his father in it, which is interesting too.
Oh, that is interesting. Did he directed that movie, right?
I do not know.
Oh, yeah, that movie. Now that you mentioned the playing his father thing, I remember that now. Hearing about that.
Okay, yeah. No, he did not direct it. He wrote it.
Seems kind of weird. Like it might work or it could fail.
Alma Harrell, which is a female director, directed it. So it looks like she's done some music videos and stuff. This is like maybe first feature. Yeah, first feature from her. But that one excites me. I've just heard good things about it. Another one is The Nightingale, which is the follow-up film from the person who directed The Babadook.
Oh, interesting.
Which I really like The Babadook a lot, and this one seems kind of different. It doesn't seem quite as much of a horror film. It's a bit more of a like a brutal film to watch in terms of violence, from what I'm understanding. But I'm just interested in that based on her previous film.
Yeah, and then of course there's the Ted Bundy movie starring Zac Efron.
Oh yeah, Netflix acquired that.
Yeah, which will also be interesting to see what Netflix does with it.
I hear they're going to give it
next week.
I hear they're going to give it like an awards push in theaters like next fall.
That would be interesting. But yeah, I'm interested to see how his performance is. I know they released a trailer for it recently. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard mixed things about it. So
yeah. Last thing I want to mention that I saw that interested me was The Farewell, which is a dramedy. It's an all Asian cast. It's about an Asian family, and all I really know is that they lie to their grandmother who's dying about her illness so that she can be happy and not like dread dying. That's all I really know about the plot, but I think it stars Awkwafina, who I really liked from Crazy Rich Asians, and she was my favorite part of Ocean's 8. But
yeah,
it also seems like a very different performance from her than what we saw in either of those films. So I'm very intrigued by that one. It's called The Farewell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that got picked up by A24 too. So I'm usually looking forward to A24 releases.
At the very least, they're usually interesting.
For sure.
Cool. Anything else from Sundance we want to talk about?
I don't think so.
No. I'm just going to keep an eye out for like all those movies, and I think there's more that we haven't talked about, but I think that's the landscape for the next year of films, right?
Yeah.
Or at least the smaller films.
Cool. So hopefully those will make their way to where normal people can see them sooner than later.
Exactly.
Yeah, please.
All right. So I guess I'm next, and what has been on my mind was a movie that Justin kind of brought up in the last episode, but neither one of us had seen it besides him, so we couldn't really go into much, discussion about it, and that is Vice, directed by Adam McKay and starring Christian Bale. He has been going around getting a lot of Best Actor talk and awards at other award shows based on his role as Dick Cheney here, and the movie itself, though, even though it got nominated for Best Picture, has been sort of controversial amongst film Twitter and critics and stuff. So anyway, I just want to go ahead and say I enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's not great, I don't think, and I think it's a little maybe too broad in its scope and might be stronger if it was toned down a bit. But overall, I enjoyed it, and I thought it was interesting. I think Christian Bale is deserving of all the praise he's getting lately. I don't know that I think it belongs on the Best Picture lineup, but it certainly belongs there more than Black Panther or A Star is Born or some of the other movies.
Yeah, I think I said this last week, but it's now my third favorite Best Picture option, right behind Roma and The Favorite.
Yeah? It's somewhere there, yeah, third or fourth. I don't know. It's not a it's not a whole lot of great Best Picture nominees this year, but Vice is it's good. It's I can see why people don't like it though. It's a little unfocused.
Yeah, actually, I think that's where I come in. I watched it this week as well, and I didn't like it as much as either one of you guys did. I think what you were saying, Mike, it's a little bit too much. For me, it was a little bit too winky at the camera, too, if that makes sense. It's just a little bit too meta, the way they talk about things, and it just didn't quite work for me. Maybe if they had to tone that back a little bit, it would have been a little bit better. I think you're right. The performances are really great. Christian Bale, Amy Adams, once again, turns in a great performance.
Yeah,
I think.
Amy Adams is my favorite performance in the movie, even more than Christian Bale's.
Yeah, agreed. She is really good. It's amazing how, Christian Bale disappears, right? Gains a lot of weight and disappears behind this, but Amy Adams doesn't have to do any physical body change, and she still disappears into that role, and she's really great in this film. But there's a little bit too much, just snark, I think, for me in this film. So that's kind of where I come down. I don't think you guys
I want to ask you to expand upon that word a bit more. Snark.
Snark.
You mean you feel like it's too unfair to the people being portrayed? Too snarky towards them?
No. It feels like it's an inside joke, and they're winking at you.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Look what we're doing here, haha. And it just, to me, I wasn't able to get past that. I think you guys are right. It's probably the third or fourth best picture nomination. But I just, that's in a weak year anyways. But ultimately, I can see a little bit more why people don't like it than maybe you guys do. But I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
Well, I'd like to disagree with you, if I may, about the snark.
Okay.
And
absolutely.
One of the main reasons for that is because I think if we pull back on that, or if we do less of that, we end up with just a little bit more of a regular biopic, right? And something closer to Oliver Stone's W, right? That I want to say we've seen it 100 times before, right? Even if it's a different person, and that may not be a totally fair thing because biopics have their place. But I was happy to see something like refreshingly different with it, and part of that was like the like funny moments they would freeze frame on people, or some of the sort of meta humor about it.
One of my favorite editing things that he did in the movie, like I kind of agree with you a little bit, Chris, for the most part. Like I'm kind of in between both of you, I think, whereas like I see a lot of what Chris is saying and I was taken out of the movie a lot, but I also enjoyed some of it. And one of the things I enjoyed the most is whenever he has his like first heart attack.
Yeah.
And like the sound it makes when he like drops to his knees, and then like again when he hits the ground is I don't know. I found that to be pretty funny. I don't know why.
Yeah. I think most of his heart attack scenes were pretty funny to me. Like
yeah, that's true.
He just didn't seem to really like phase him.
Yeah,
yeah.
It was just really
so
dry.
Used to it.
I actually was reading that apparently Christian Bale told Adam, or was like asking Adam McKay, like, "Hey, how do you want me to play this? Like nauseous or like or what?" And he's like, "Nauseous? Why would you play it nauseous?" And he's like, "That's not a symptom of heart attacks." And then Christian Bale's like, "Yeah, it is." And then like in post-production, apparently Adam McKay started getting really nauseous and remembered what Christian Bale had told him, and that information saved his life from the heart attack getting worse because he was having one.
Oh, wow.
Apparently, yeah, I believe that's true. I didn't believe it, but then everyone's like, no, it's true.
Interesting.
According to Adam McKay.
Yeah. So what I find interesting about the movie is basically, I think like a lot of that meta stuff and a lot of what they're doing is sort of a nod to the like circus that we have that is like politics, or at least like was politics in 2016, where like we tend to like be more entertained by things, and that entertainment can make us look past what's like right in front of our face. And to me, that like the end of the movie, which we won't go into like specifics about, but like what happens in the end of the movie with like a particular character looking into the camera, like makes that all the more like in my face, I guess, like as an audience member viewing the movie. Like I feel like in the end, like the movie's kind of pointing the finger at me for, you know what I mean? Like being entertained by the political circus and the political characters that we have, instead of seeing that these people are pretty smart and conniving and cunning, or they can be.
Mm-hmm. I think that final moment was the most powerful of those choices that they made. Ultimately, I think, though, I think you're right. For a biopic, they made some unique choices to make it more interesting than a normal biopic. For me, it just tonally doesn't work, especially with the Dick Cheney stuff. But I understand how you could find that interesting and unique in a biopic.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of movie would you like to see about Dick Cheney?
I don't know. I was actually thinking while I was watching it a little bit more along the lines of a documentary. And maybe it's because it's so recent. So I kind of don't...
So would you... like an actual documentary, or just something like Darkest Hour?
Like a documentary, something that examines this, especially because we're so close to it still, I think. For me, like a documentary that presents facts as opposed to all the other stuff, like the kind of over-the-top stuff that they're doing in this film. Don't get me wrong, like I'm not a Dick Cheney fan or anything like that, but just something that presents facts. And that was just the thing that popped into my mind, was a documentary as I was watching it, like as opposed to a biased take on this. So,
well, a documentary, make no mistake, every documentary you've ever seen has been biased.
No,
that's why, personally speaking, I prefer fiction movies to documentary movies, because every time there's a big, huge, popular documentary, a month after it's really popular, there's always the controversial story about how you can't trust anything you just watched. Like both those fire documentaries on Hulu and Netflix.
Oh, right.
Making a Murderer. All of those. Like, right? They're all crap. They're all just entertainment.
Let's get Ken Burns on it, or who's the guy that did Fog of War?
Yeah, well, I think Fog of War.
He did. Did
he do Taxi to the Dark Side as well? I'm just blanking on his name.
He did the brief history of time.
Errol Morris?
Yeah, Errol Morris. I mean, ultimately, whether it's a documentary or not, that's just where I came down on the film. That's irrelevant. It's not a documentary.
Right.
So.
Well, I think what the fiction film allows is to bring to light like the themes.
Mm-hmm. You can be upfront and you're biased in a narrative film.
That's true.
Yeah, it's easy with a documentary for people to get hung up on the facts of like, well, this wasn't totally accurate, so maybe we can dismiss this entire film. And then if you have a fiction film and you're trying to get a message across or a theme across, then, it's a little bit harder for someone to just dismiss that. You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because that's how I feel.
So, anyways, I think it is a divisive movie, but I get not liking it too, because I think it has a niche audience that's going to really enjoy it. It's not like, Roma or, I guess Bohemian Rhapsody or A Star is Born, where it's just like, it's got a very broad appeal. It's not that movie at all. So I totally get not liking it.
And that being said, I think I'm right there with you guys on, where it stands in the Best Picture race and stuff like that. It's just I fell on the other side of it, just barely on the other side of it. So
I gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, on our Letterboxd, I believe, Justin, you have it as like a 3.5, right? Or do you have it as a 3?
Something like that.
Yeah, I think I have it as a 3. Yeah, I think I have it as a 3, but 3.5, something like that.
And I think I'm 2.5, 3. Depending on the day, right? And the other thing I would caveat it with is I just saw it today, so it's still settling in. So we'll see how I feel about it in a week.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Last question about the snarky meta things. Like, did you enjoy the middle of the movie credit scene?
Sounds like a no.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting.
It's a no. It's okay if you didn't.
Ultimately,
I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, it was funny. But I guess it's tonally, it just didn't fit there for me, like in this movie. And that's just my reaction to it. Like, there's all this other stuff and seriousness going on. And tonally, there are these two movies in there. And I just didn't think that they meshed very well, is I guess what I would say. I thought it was funny, but ultimately, it doesn't help the movie.
Okay, cool. Just curious.
Valid.
Yeah.
I think that's valid. All right. So I think that does it for all of that. We won't go into any more detail with Vice, but one of the better movies, I guess, that you could be watching for the Oscars, but mileage will vary.
Yeah,
watch it and write in. Tell us which one's right.
Yeah, and we've kind of said that Christian Bale's great in it, but I do think he probably deserves Best Actor out of all the performances I've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I fully support him getting a Best Actor for this.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Okay, cool. So I guess it is time to move into our review of Velvet Buzzsaw.
Critique is so limiting and emotionally draining. I'm hoping you find something to explain what's happening.
Which one's better, 1 or 2? Better, worse, no different.
No different.
I'm quite curious to know what you think.
I think sober hasn't been good for him.
Pierce was in the full bloom of alcoholism here.
Exactly.
Never should have quit drinking.
No originality. No courage. My opinion.
I can't save you.
I found something.
Who did these? Mesmeric.
A guy upstairs, he died.
And you just took them.
He had no family or friends.
I can make you rich.
It's brilliant.
Demand has people ready to kill.
Have you ever heard of an artist named Ventral D's?
No, not in our records, and we have everyone. The artist used blood to create the reddish blacks.
You ever notice anything about this painting? Look at it long enough, it moves.
Okay, so as always, we're going to be speaking very generally at first about Velvet Buzzsaw. We are not going to be giving any spoilers away. And before we move into spoilers, we'll give you a spoiler alert, and there will be a bumper with all kinds of cool movie quotes in it, so you can hit pause before you get anything spoiled and, go see the movie.
Absolutely. Okay.
You don't even have to go see the movie. You can just go to Netflix and, go to your TV.
Yes.
Yeah. So convenient. The future is here, gentlemen.
I know.
Okay.
I liked it.
So, yeah. Although I am, just a sidebar real quick. I do like movie theaters, so I wouldn't want this to be like an every week event, but
Yeah.
it's nice to add a Netflix movie to the docket every now and then so you don't have to go, I don't know, what came out this week in theaters? Go see Miss Bala or something.
Yeah.
Anyways, Velvet Buzzsaw. Looks like it was written and directed by Dan Gilroy of Nightcrawler fame, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Rene Russo, Zaw Ashton, and more. The IMDb synopsis says, after a series of paintings by an unknown artist are discovered, a supernatural force enacts revenge on those who have allowed their greed to get in the way of art.
Yeah. Who wants to go first in tackling this movie?
I will.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was a fan of Nightcrawler back when it came out. So when Dan Gilroy's newest trailer dropped, like last month, I believe, for Velvet Buzzsaw, I was pretty excited. I think watching that trailer was probably a mistake, though.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at first I thought it was going to be spoiling too much for me, but now I feel like based on the trailer, I was expecting a much crazier movie than what I got.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I enjoyed this movie. I think Jake Gyllenhaal is very watchable here. I think maybe some of the other actors might be confused as to what kind of movie they're actually in, because I think Jake Gyllenhaal is aware of what kind of movie this is. I enjoyed like the on-the-nose critique of the art world. I also thought it was interesting how the film brings up making art and the idea of, you know, if no one sees it, does it still matter? So even though I did like it, it is a bit clunky. It has that Netflix green screen look, which brought me out of it in a few of the outside scenes. I wish they would get that green screen under control. I also think that maybe the horror elements weren't quite scary enough and the satirical comedy elements weren't quite funny enough, or at least not as much as they could have been. I feel like you could probably double down on both of those things. But overall, I think the movie has charm. So
Okay.
I'm leaning into like a good, not great situation. What do you think, Justin?
Well, in some ways, I'm the opposite of you. I do agree with some of the things that you said. I think I just feel a little stronger about how detrimental those things are to the movie, right? Bottom line, I mean, for me, like the movie ultimately didn't work for me, like on the whole, because I have a few things that happen in the film, a few elements about it that I did like, even though I didn't like it a whole lot. There were the things that I did like, but overall there was like way more things that I didn't like, right? And even the things that I didn't like, I just barely didn't like, right? Like I didn't really like hate a lot of things about it. So like basically I found myself not feeling strongly one way or another for most of the film. And to me, it had a lot of sort of mediocre stuff going on in it to start with. I think the story felt a little petty to me at times because it feels like it was written by somebody who got shat on by the art world or by critics and was pissed off and just wanted to write like a screw you to art critics and people who profit off of artists' work who aren't the artists themselves. Which I don't know, to me, they didn't really expand beyond that idea enough, like with like the story or the script, because I found like the cinematography didn't seem to be very interesting or like to do anything great. Like it just kind of seemed to be pointing at the people who were talking a lot of the times.
Yeah, I agree with the cinematography thing for sure.
I think the score felt kind of like a paint by numbers score where like it was, you know, strings in the places that it should be strings to make tension for like the horror-y scenes. And it was just kind of basic to me. And the way that the story unfolded to, like, it was pretty unsatisfying to me, like in the sense that I think for the most part, we see everything play out in front of our eyes, which leaves no doubt about what's going on or mystery to wonder about or really anything to wonder about, right? Like I just didn't have anything to think about the movie. It's like just here's all of the pieces right in front of you, watch them unfold. That's not always a bad thing, but it didn't work for me in this film. And then again, I think the performances, I'm with you that everybody but Jake Gyllenhaal was pretty bland, or their performances didn't work for one reason or another. But outside of that, I'll just talk a little bit about a few things that I did like. I enjoyed some of the death scenes. There were a couple that I found kind of funny or just really like enjoyed conceptually. I like the themes that the movie presents. I don't necessarily like watching the movie tell me about those themes or watching the movie explain them or let them I don't like watching them unfold in the film, but I like thinking about them afterwards. And I also really enjoyed the end credits, but not in the sense of like, oh, the movie's over, but just like what happens at the end credits.
Me too.
I really enjoyed the final image that we get and what that means and what that says. Like, I found it to be like the most compelling thing in the movie. And
I agree with that.
So those are some things that I liked. So overall, more things I didn't like than things I did like. Like, to me, it's just barely a bad film as opposed to just an okay film. That's where I come down.
Okay.
So, Chris, what did you think?
Yeah, real quick, I wanted to talk about Netflix and how I think that this is going to be the year and for Netflix here, like to make or break these new movies that they're putting out. I know we had Roma last year, but it's really interesting to me to watch how Netflix starts to deal with these things. Like, we just got a trailer for it and just realized that this was going to be a movie about a month ago, like you were saying, Mike. So I'm really interested in watching how Netflix releases movies and goes about their way in releasing movies. And I also think, it's going to be a really interesting year for Netflix. Yeah. And that being said, just like both of you guys, I saw Nightcrawler and I really enjoyed it, even though it wasn't an X-Men spinoff movie.
Especially because it wasn't an X-Men spinoff movie, you mean?
Yeah, especially because it wasn't. So I was excited about this re-teaming of them both, Jake Gyllenhaal and Dan Gilroy. Yeah, and I also watched the trailer like you, and I was excited to see what they had to say about art and art criticism. I feel like this movie is ambitious in what it's trying to say. I think Jake Gyllenhaal, I always enjoy watching him make bold choices, even if those choices don't necessarily always work. It's interesting to watch him make these choices. Like, I'm looking at you, Okja. Ultimately, I don't think it always works, just like you, Justin, like in what it's saying about art and art criticism and the monetization of art. I don't necessarily think it comes together as a whole, like with the horror pieces and then this critique on the art world. You're right, Justin. There are things that are interesting to me. I thought, just like both of you guys, it was visually bland and not very compelling, except for moments that had to do with the art. So I wonder if that's not a choice. So there's visually bland for the most part, but then when we look at the art or we see these supernatural things, it looks more interesting than the film itself does. And you guys can maybe answer that later. But ultimately, I'm right there with. I think I'm more with Justin on this one, where it's kind of hard to really recommend this movie to anybody. It's interesting, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. And maybe that's a merit to the film in itself that I want to talk about it. So those are my thoughts.
All right, sounds good.
I want to talk about tone because you mentioned this, Mike, and I agree that it could have gone more in either direction or maybe both directions simultaneously, like between its like satire, horror, comedy, thriller. Like, to me, it was trying to be all of those things at once, but not really committing to either one. And so I found myself a lot of the time in the movie not knowing how to feel. Like, when certain things happened that seemed funny, I wasn't really laughing because I didn't know if it was supposed to be funny. And when things happened, they were supposed to make me, be emotional or have some sort of emotional reaction, like fright or shock. I wasn't quite there either.
Yeah, I think the comedy bits didn't bother me so much. I mostly found like the art world stuff interesting with all the characters and their dynamics between one another. Mm-hmm. I didn't care that I wasn't laughing because I thought I was interested enough in all these people to where I wasn't concerned enough about that. I think where it fails for me is the horror elements seem so tame.
They do.
I think I'm right there with you, but on both sides of it, like the kind of like Justin was saying, like the horror elements don't necessarily work, and then also the other side of it, the art criticism world. While I think we are getting good performances from Toni Collette and some of the other characters, I just don't think it quite works. It's not compelling enough.
The girl from Stranger Things was good. Natalia Dyer.
Yeah.
Who's which one is that? So was she the sister in Stranger Things? Who was
Coco.
like the okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Her bit was kind of funny. I'll give it that. Like, but not super funny because I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be like the things that happened with her. I can't say because we're not in spoilers yet.
Yeah, I just either side of it didn't quite work for me. I didn't necessarily care about the characters, so when the horror stuff happened, I wasn't necessarily concerned for them, and I also didn't want to laugh at them, or it wasn't like I wasn't cheering for them to die either. Does that make sense? Like maybe in a slasher film, in some characters you don't like, so you want them to die, and I didn't feel that way either. So it's kind of weird. Kind of I didn't feel much for this movie, if that makes sense.
And I think I'm with you. I think the key word that I thought of when I was watching the horror parts was what you said, Mike, was tame, because they felt almost like PG-13 horror films at times, right? And
yeah,
I wanted more, I think. And I think it would have tonally fit more.
Yeah, especially a certain scene with like an arm. I'll just put it that way.
Right. Right.
And that was the bloodiest it got.
Yeah.
Well, they do things like that make it have to be an R-rated film, like just with the horror, right? At least from what I think of. But if you're going to be the R-rated film, like I want to see you be an R-rated horror film, not like mostly PG-13, because then all of that stuff just seems so weak.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Most of what I want to talk about has to do with spoilers. So whenever you guys are ready, I'm ready to just move on in.
So what do you guys think about the choice? The reason the cinematography was so bland was that was a choice, perhaps, so that the art stood out more. That's just my only thinking of it.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. And I do agree with you that like some of the shots with the art pop the most, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think that anyone would choose to make the other scenes as bland as they are.
Maybe they went too far.
Yeah, I just think it's a Netflix problem. Like, I think Netflix will greenlight your script no matter how artistic it is or whatever, or how little mainstream appeal it has, but you got to be very careful with your budget, right? Because they're not going to give you very much.
Yeah, I think what I would say is that if it's a choice, I think there's a difference between minimal cinematography and bland cinematography. Right. And to me, a choice would be to be very minimal with your cinematography. And this just came across most of the time as bland. And part of that I blame on editing, too, because, with editing, I can cut to a person when they're talking every time they're talking. And when the next person starts talking, I cut to them and just kind of cut around as every character's talking. And that, doesn't make the shot seem any more interesting. Right. Like there's not a lot of dynamics to the editing or the shots in that way, right? Like they're not like pulling that tension out of the shots and making like a regular shot of someone talking, elevating it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. There were some long takes at the beginning, like in the art world, like where it kind of panned around and two people would be talking and then it would move from them to the next person. Those were a little bit more dynamic, but it still didn't feel...
Yeah, I mean...
great to me.
90s drama TV shows did that too, right? And I think at this point, just simply having a longer take isn't quite enough.
Fair enough.
Or at least it wasn't that way in this movie.
Yeah.
Maybe the only other thing before we move into spoilers that I want to talk about is, do you guys feel that there's an issue with the movie? Or is it okay that I don't think anybody in the movie is very likable? And I don't think we have anybody to root for or worry about. Or at least I didn't. Like, I basically, like, everybody in the movie could die. And I would have been like, okay, fine. Right?
Right. I don't think that's necessarily a big deal because I think it goes for that approach. Like, it has the old school, like, George Romero approach to, like, a horror movie, which is, like, here are the least likable characters in the world. Now have fun as they die one by one and get what they deserve.
Yeah.
The problem is it wasn't, like, creative enough with the horror, right? Like, that's part of, like, the slasher genre in general, right? It was like you're supposed to look forward to all the characters dying, except for maybe the main character. With this movie, I think every time one of them was about to die, you were supposed to be like, all right, here we go. And, especially because each death has to do with how they live their lives and the decisions they make,
Mm-hmm.
And so I like it on paper. Well, maybe not in the script, but I like the idea of it in broad strokes. I just, like I said, I wish the horror elements had been a little more satisfying to where it like Final Destination, right? Like you didn't like any of those characters really in those movies, but like the ones I've seen, I always looked forward to like, how are they going to do this? I know it's coming,
Yeah. I think Coco was the closest one to cheer for.
To a likable character.
Yeah, but then I think on the other side of that,
I like John Malkovich.
These are,
and
yeah,
I like both the artists, John Malkovich and
Daveed Diggs.
Daveed Diggs, yes. And I think because they are true artists, that's why their stories end a little differently, maybe, than you would expect.
Yeah. I think on the other side of it, too, where I didn't dislike them enough that I was cheering for their deaths, right? Does that make sense? So I just was in the middle and I didn't necessarily care either way. So that was kind of how...
Well, that's what I'm saying is because the horror element isn't fun.
Right.
Like if you're enjoying the horror element, then you're gonna be into it and you're gonna be like, all right, next,
Yeah.
Right. I maybe you need one or the other, right? Like it's got to be fun, or we need someone to like be on their side and not want anything bad to happen to them.
Yeah, and I would say that if this movie didn't have, stuff to say about art and give you a little bit to like unpack, I would not like this movie at all. So as it stands, I think there's just barely enough under the surface to where like I can dig into it, and but just ultimately not enough to where I can recommend it.
Yeah. I think that's totally fair.
It's a bit on the nose, right?
Yeah, a bit on the nose. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So I'm ready to move into spoilers if you guys are.
Let's do it.
Okay.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
Any more cigarettes you got up there? I'll tell you all about it.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
And here we go.
Now we can really talk about some things.
Yeah.
And get into it. Does anyone have anything they want to jump off with?
I'll just jump off of Rene Russo's character real quick. I think it's interesting that, like, she's used to be in a punk band, Velvet Buzzsaw. And that name, Velvet Buzzsaw, is like kind of like her character, I guess, right? Which is like it's a contradiction. It's
right.
like something soft and then something not soft. Right? Like it's like her, right? Like she came from like a punk rock root, but now she's like the total opposite of that. She no longer understands how to make art for nothing anymore. She only understands the profit of it all, right? Especially when you compare that to John Malkovich with what's going on with him the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys think of Rene Russo, her character, and her arc in this movie? Well, I guess she doesn't really have much of an arc, but what did you think about her overall story?
Well, I mean, for me, it felt a little bland, I think, for what you're saying, that like she didn't really have an arc. And she was just kind of the same for most of it until she kind of figured out that people around her are dying because of something she did. But that happens pretty late in the movie, and it takes like 3 to 4 people dying around her before she realizes it.
Yeah, she has my favorite death, though. I think she has the best death in the movie.
Yeah, maybe from an artistic standpoint, I agree, the most interesting death. From an entertainment standpoint, I like some of the other ones a little better. I think the thing that bothered me about her character is I was always trying to place the purpose of like the punk rock background and the Velvet Buzzsaw name, and like when that was going to matter enough for like the film to be titled Velvet Buzzsaw.
I think I think she encapsulates sort of the entire theme of the movie, her character. The idea of an artist who gets so jaded that she can't appreciate art the way it's supposed to be appreciated anymore. She can only speak for other people, make profit off of it, belittle their art. Same with Jake Gyllenhaal's character. He's not an artist. He is someone who just tears it down, right? And like puts a frame in it. Like a lot of this movie, like you were saying, is kind of maybe railing against the idea of art criticism because it kind of belittles art in general. And and especially because, as portrayed in the movie, the people who decide what is good and what is bad art anyway all have their own personal interests in mind anyway.
Right.
And they're not They don't care about the art. The only people in the movie that actually appreciate the art and make it through unscathed are the people who are new to the scene, like Coco, or the actual artists themselves, who can look at great art and just appreciate it. So I think the name Velvet Buzzsaw is supposed to be like two sides of how people's relationship with art can change over time, right?
Right.
Like it's two extremes. And I think she's gone from one extreme to the other and completely lost sight of all of that and completely sold out from her punk rock background, I guess. Which you brought up the beach scene earlier. You brought up the end scene, the last shot of the movie.
Right, yeah.
Which is the beach scene. So, at one point we find out that Rene Russo is pretty much like pawned off John Malkovich's character off to someone else because he's not producing art anymore. He's not producing anything valuable to her.
Mm-hmm.
Then, as the movie goes on and the end scene happens, you see him, drawing art in the beach. And I guess, to me, that's like the absolute truest form of art, right? Like that is, I guess, what could be more pure than that? That is art that he's making entirely for himself with the intention of no one else to see, knowing it won't be seen by anybody, but it's the actual process of him being able to do it and expressing himself in that way that, I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm with you on that, and that's some of what I took away. Also, I think that it's a bit about, art, and this goes with like the punk rock band thing, right? And that like those certain movements in art or in music are like so relevant to now or the now of when they happen, right? And
yeah,
and maybe like the most like interesting relevant art is what's being made now, and like looking at art that's existed and that's been is maybe less interesting. And so like him on the beach making stuff that's going to be washed away by the sand highlights that, like that now, like that the art being made now is important, and it doesn't matter if it's going to stay around, right?
Yeah.
And I like that. I like what you said, and that idea are some of the things that I've been thinking about the most since watching the movie. So that's why I like that end credit scene so much, because it finally it hit me with something that really like connected with me.
Yeah, I agree. Like I was like, why is John Malkovich here the entire movie? What is the point of this? And then that ending scene, it tied together a lot of ideas and themes and kind of made them themes that I had otherwise like long since checked out of make sense to me, and like kind of like, I don't know, make it better in my opinion. Oh, and that also kind of fits into what happened to Toni Collette, right? The reason she died was because she gave up her noble job, her passionate job, and got a new job in the hopes of exploiting art.
Right.
On the bandwagon of profit,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and her death scene, like the death scene itself was okay, right? And it's something you kind of see coming from like the first scene in the movie where we meet that like sphere ball thing.
She's like, there's holes in it for you to stick your hand in, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, right. But I really enjoyed the aftermath of it, where was telling the story of like everyone just left her alone because they thought it was part of the art installation.
Oh yeah, I like that shot. That's one of the best shots in the movie is whenever Coco comes in and she starts screaming, and all the kids that were originally playing in the blood like stop playing and look at the body and like recontextualize what they've been doing, and like you see them like take a step back. That was good.
There's another moment similar to that when John Dondon, I think was his name, the other art peddler, walks into John Malkovich's home, and there's like a pile of trash.
Yeah, a pile of garbage.
And he walks up, a pile of garbage. He's like, oh, this is amazing. And he's like, that's not art. But I thought that was funny.
Yeah. It's a bit of low-hanging fruit, but at least it worked for a little bit. I'm glad I didn't do too much of that.
What do you guys think of the... Speaking of, something you mentioned earlier reminded me of something else in the movie, Justin. You said how, in regards to like the punk rock and art is of a certain time, and that's why the art on the beach is probably like what it's all about,
Yeah.
What do you think about, there was at the beginning and also at the end for, was this Jake Gyllenhaal's character's name, Morph?
Yes.
Yeah.
The homeless robot superhero. So... do you think that's also a comment on superhero culture now and how it's so popular, but it's only a matter of time before it's like, forgotten about and we've moved on from it and looking for the next new thing? Or do you think it's just entirely coincidental that he was a superhero homeless man? Or
was he killing art and art criticism?
Well, there you go. Yeah, there you go. But do you think that the idea that he is a superhero, like a masked superhero, do you think that's like, do you think there's anything to that? Or do you think it's just entirely like, it was just a weird thing to make?
That's an interesting comment too, because wasn't there already an iteration of Hobo Man? So like, he's like, we've already seen this. We've already done there. We've been there. You know? So
yeah,
that's
with
a superhero.
Stuff like that makes me look at this movie and be like, maybe it's not so bad. Like just the idea of asking those questions. But anyway.
Yeah. I think, it could also be like a superhero in the sense of like the satisfaction of the homeless guy taking down the snooty art critic that's like shitting on people's work, right? It's a heroic character in that scene. Could be wrong.
Yeah, maybe, but not until like the end.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like in the end when he comes after him.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, which that was the other death that I really enjoyed, and like I found kind of like grotesquely funny, even though it wasn't like super violent. Just like the whole idea that this robot like chasing him down, and it was funny.
So whenever he died, was he in the process of getting ready to destroy all of those, or was he actually trying to save them and store them away and keep them forever?
I wasn't sure. I thought he was maybe just trying to get them like away from everybody so that nobody else could see them and sell it and see them. Yeah. I wasn't sure that he was going to burn them.
Yeah.
Which is odd too, because even if you burn them, like it seemed like these paintings just would burst into flame randomly. So
only when they want to kill you.
Yeah.
Did you guys find yourself like confused at all about like the rules of the world or the rules of the revenge? Because for a while it seemed like it was based around the art of the people. Like not necessarily, obviously everyone who's like profited off of it and has sold the art or taken advantage of it in some way, they're all getting killed. But it seemed for a while like the medium that the demon, supernatural spirit, whatever, was coming from the actual artwork and was maybe like connected to the artwork that they found and sold. But eventually they're coming out of like other pieces of artwork, like graffiti on the wall or that weird room.
So I think the paintings themselves actually can just manipulate the world around you.
Okay.
Or art. The art.
Yeah, I was like, it's almost like they awoke like the god who oversees art and like art as a whole and can like move through any art and punish people who disgrace art in general. So to me, it's kind of less about the actual work and painting and any of like the suggestions that they have in the film where of like that there was something weird going on with his actual art. Because remember there's a scene where like the girls archiving the art or like examining it and doing tests, and she's like, oh my gosh. And it seemed like it was going to be some weird like there's element to his painting, like he put his blood into the painting or something like that, right? And it seemed like it was going to be more about his paintings specifically.
I guess I think it still is. I think it's just those paintings aren't the specific thing that are killing you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I guess like I felt like they kind of tossed us this idea that it might be specifically those paintings and connected with the artist.
Yeah, I think the paintings have to be around you. Like in this, like they have to be able to see you. The eyes of the person in the painting have to be able to see you because it's always the eyes that change.
Yeah. Do you think that's why the main girl, when she dies, she's not near any of the art, but some of it pops up on her phone? Is that why that happens?
She's on the there's some eyes behind her on like a mural.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not the mural's not the guy's art.
That's true.
It's like random graffiti, and this is the one that really like throws me off.
That's true. Did she have any of the art on her?
Well, her phone changes.
It was on her phone.
Her phone changes the picture, but she doesn't bring it up. Like her phone. Remember, like the phone freezes on the picture of the painting.
Yeah. Okay. I guess since it's on her phone, I guess that counts.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. That's just one of the things that confused me, for better or worse.
Yeah. Well, that's all I've pretty much got.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm right there.
Yeah, I think that's all I have. I have one question. The main girl, we haven't really talked about her at all. I believe her name is Zawe Ashton.
Mm-hmm.
Performance-wise, what did you guys think about her?
Performance-wise, I don't think I had many thoughts about her one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there. I didn't hate her, or I didn't think her performance was poor, but I don't know that there was much.
Yeah, nothing's jumping out at me one way or the other.
Depth.
Okay. Well, I thought she was exceptionally poor, or whereas I found like other people in the movie a bit more like what you said earlier in like the beginning of the review, Mike, that like it seemed like some of the actors didn't know what type of movie they were in.
Yeah, which I don't blame them for. This seems like a weird movie to try to figure out.
Yeah, and maybe she's like the most extreme victim of that, because just everything she did, like I felt like all I could see was like somebody acting and someone like widening their eyes in moments, like trying to react to stuff, and it was like really off-putting. It was one of the things that it helped me from, or not helped, I guess, but kept me from getting completely into the movie, because it's just like every scene she had, I was just like, I'm watching a movie. I'm watching like an actor.
She has a lot of scenes.
Yeah, she has a lot. So I found it interesting. Like everyone else is not doing a ton of interesting stuff, but like her as a main character, it really bothered me.
Yeah, I can see that. I can tell you she wasn't very charismatic. Like I could have gone for Stranger Things girl to be Natalie Dyer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
could have used her in that part instead. I think she's very watchable.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
For sure. Did you guys like the art? Like when you saw the art?
I did.
In
most of it
stuff. Yeah,
not something I would want, but as far as paintings go, they all caught my eye. Like I remember thinking that at one point in the movie, I was like, I think probably the best thing they did in this whole like movie was actually pick pretty interesting and compelling looking paintings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that seems so hard to me when you're making a film about something like that, where like someone's supposed to be
because you got to get it
an
right.
Exceptionally great singer or an exceptionally great painter. Yeah. It's like it's got to be exceptional, or we're not going to buy it.
Like like in A Star Is Born, I remember being like, I don't get it until she started singing like good songs, and then I was like, oh, okay. It starts out in that movie with like she sings like La Vie en Rose, which is good, but like most of her songs aren't that good, and like I don't know. Anyway, that's a whole nother movie.
It is. Well, it's like when she's singing The Shallows in the parking lot, and you're like, okay, you wrote that song? Fine. But then when you hear the real song, it's like, okay, I get it. It's good.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, it's kind of the same thing, I think.
Let me ask you.
Just basically, if they hadn't got those paintings right, it would have been hard to believe that everyone was going so crazy about them. But I believed that part. I didn't have any problem with that part at all.
Yeah, I agree.
So now that we're kind of coming to the end of our review or critique, are either of you worried about art killing us now since we've critiqued this film?
Let me tell you something. For the listeners at home that don't know where I record at my work's office, like in studio, and we have a shared studio space with a bunch of other artists. And the main like shared space in this studio that I walk through to get to my office is filled with like art. And also there's a bit of art in my office that like my boss has put around, the like paintings that she has done and stuff. And some of it's pretty creepy, but like it's extra creepy today. Like walking through here like by myself at night recording.
Well, I hope you make it.
Just don't sell any of it.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to ask you guys, before we go, last thing about the movie that I wanted to ask. Do you guys think the homeless people selling the art are going to come to the same fate as the other like snooty art dealers that are all rich and judgmental? Or do you think that selling it for like $5 on the street to passersby who truly love it, do you think that is small scale enough, or do you think it's just the same thing?
That's what I took from it. Like the people that were coming up to just had genuine joy from it. They're like, oh, I really like that. I'll pay you $5. How much? And it's like a fair price, and there's no like,
critic telling you what to think. There's no high society making
conniving.
Yeah. There's no like girl telling a reviewer to go give her ex-boyfriend a bad review.
Yeah. It's more pure form of it, like, and the guy doesn't even know what he's selling, right? He found it in a dumpster or something. So
right. I mean, I think that's where I come down to, but it's also one of those things that muddies up the theme because it doesn't really let me know.
I don't think it muddies it. I think it leaves you with something to talk about. I think it's still there.
Okay. I mean, that's fair.
Muddy doesn't always equal bad.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. I think it's just, it can make me feel that things can be like unfocused, right?
Yeah,
and maybe that's not the case in this one, but some other things about the movie make me already think the movie's a little unfocused. So
there are definitely a lot of things that are unfocused, but I don't think that particular thing applies, in my opinion.
Okay. Fair enough.
But I agree with you in the other senses. There's a lot in this movie that does not add up, but I think that's one of the intentional questions left open.
I agree with you. I think you're right about that, and I'm probably wrong calling it muddy.
That green screen, though, that muddies my enjoyment. That muddies the aesthetic. Would that apply? Would that be a good place to use muddy?
Sure. Yeah, and since that mud is ugly.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that does it for the show, right?
Yeah, that does it for me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. And of course, as always, thanks Jake Wagner Russell for doing our intro and outro music. If you like our intro and outro music and you want to hear more of Jake Wagner Russell's music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Our next episode, we don't really know what we're going to do because we are indecisive. So, we'll put a poll out on Twitter, and you can find it where, Justin?
Yeah, the poll will be on Twitter at casualcinecast. Also probably on Facebook and Instagram, same place at casualcinecast.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening, guys. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next time.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
I think the art already got Justin.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
He's still alive.